Hey there! Welcome to Culture by Culture, a multidimensional exploration of Black and Asian pop cultural ties. I'm your host with too many library holds, Delia. And today I'm joined by my friends, my homies, and the co-host of the Wizard Team podcast, Bayana and Porshèa.
Hey.
Hey, y'all. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having us on. I'm happy to be here for the first time ever.
I know. So everybody, if you're listening, during the first season, Bayana came on, I think, episode 5, maybe, perhaps. I'll link it in the show notes if y'all want to go listen to it. We did talk about Asian fantasies a little bit there, but actually it was Bayana's idea, like, why don't we just do an episode on Asian fantasies? And I'm like, oh, hello, duh, yeah, we should do that. And Porshèa can come on. Porshèa will also almost certainly be featured at a later date on her own for our overlap in nerdery. But today, like I said, we're talking about Asian fantasy. But before we get into it, why don't y'all go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourselves and Wizard Team? Oh, and the plot thickens.
Oh, yeah. I'm Bayana. I'm a co-host of Wizard Team, which is, which is a part of Black Nerds Create Collective. And we talk about Black fantasy books, like written by Black authors. We have read Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston, and our current season is covering Legendborn by Tracy Deonn.
Get into it.
Yes, very much so. If you have not read Legendborn or its sequel, you should do that before you listen to the podcast, unless you just want to be out here spoilers free, or spoiler heavy. But yeah, so that's what we're doing right now. It's been a fun ride. We're like at the end now, which is kind of weird. I mean, we still have like at least a month left, probably. But it's
just
still
approximately like 5 episodes, right? Like 5 more episodes.
4 or 5 episodes, something like that. But it's like it's ramping up. We're in the 3rd act, so it's very. It's been really fun.
And as you might have gleaned, I am a co-host for Wizard Team podcast, Porshèa Patterson-Hurst, she, her. I along with doing the co-hosting for that podcast about Black fantasy books, I am an avid, possibly hyper. And I part of the thing that spurred that for my adult life has been being a book reviewer for Black Nerds Create, and the book review blog site that has evolved into like the social media hashtag of like the plot thickens, where I share on socials, like in video, short form video, 1-minute reviews of books that I've read. Typically they are BIPOC written and main character stories. I do occasionally have a white fantasy if it's fun, or sometimes it can be a white not fantasy, but usually it's fantasy story. And yeah, that's so if you ever want to catch up. So I think one of the areas of expertise I definitely bring to this, and I definitely stop me when I start rambling, is that I love books and I will talk your head off about books. So this is a great conversation to be having, because only behind Black fantasy books do I also like, I think if you look at my tier of like representation of authors and like the genre, like Black fantasy and Asian fantasy are like pretty close, like in how much I read them on my general reading list.
I think we need to highlight for the people listening at home and who don't know us personally, like we need to, when we say Porshèa is the girl, she a girl for books. How many books have you read this year, Porshèa?
313.
Yeesh. Yeah.
Yeesh.
Porshèa is usually like, she's usually my litmus for like books to get. Not all the time. Like there's like, for the most part, we overlap a lot on like the kinds of things we look for, and then there are certain things that
like
we might differ.
Diagram.
Yeah, but the middle part is very big. And so there are moments where like I'll see a book and I'm like, I don't know how I feel about that. Porshèa, have you read this yet? Or like when you do, let me know. Like if I'm on the fence about something, or if I'm like looking for something in particular, I'm usually like, so Porshèa, what's going on in this area? Like what you got? So Yeah.
And to be fair, I tend to be like, so these two, I'm sorry, I know this is y'all bag. I do not get to slow burn. So if I read a story with slow burn in it, I was like, okay, so here's the thing. I gave it like a 3.5, but that was because of the slow burn. So you might give it a 4.5. So maybe you'd like it. I rated it low, but you might rate it high because of the thing that I dislike, but you love. Like, like that might be the thing.
Mm-hmm. That's the thing with your friends, but also your reviewers. Just know their points of view, because I stand Portia's story graph. Like, I know she didn't like the slow burn, but I can tell like by how she rates stuff, or like she'll put little notes. I'm like, okay, I see why she didn't like it or didn't DNF'd it. I will be reading it. Yeah. It's super helpful. So you've already touched on the fact that like Black and Asian fantasy are your top tier. Same. Also, should just be clear, same. But I wanted to unpack that for our listeners who maybe aren't as into fantasy in general, maybe aren't big readers. What is it that draws you to fantasy based in other cultures?
I mean, so for me, I have this rule that was unofficial for a long time. And then like maybe last year or the year before, I realized that like I was pretty much following it to the letter. So now it's an official rule. But with the exception of like Suzanne Collins, George R.R. Martin, should he ever deign to continue and finish Game of Thrones, not holding my breath, they might be it. I don't.
Tolkien.
Oh, and Tolkien, yes, and Tolkien, because I'm getting through his thing. It's but with the exception of those three people, I don't read books by white people anymore. And part of that was because as a kid, that's kind of like not all that was available, but it was the majority of it, especially like reading fantasy and growing up, that being like the genre I was most drawn to. And so once I kind of made that decision, like it in some ways narrows the like books that I read, but also especially now, there's so many authors of color who are writing really amazing stuff. And so for me, like, it was just like, I just want all of it. You know what I mean? Like, I want to learn about different mythologies. I want to learn about like different kinds of magic that are either completely made up or based in some kind of folklore or like based in some history or something, or like inspiration. And so for me, like, I definitely read a lot of Black fantasy. I think that is just like what I'm drawn to as a Black person, but I also read a lot of Asian fantasy, both South Asian and East Asian. For me, I'm just like all of it. Like I want all of it. And obviously like I have my tropes or my like specific like pulls or whatever, but I just want to read it all. And so I do, and I just buy them. So it's more a like want to read from just a lot of different places that aren't like the
dominant culture.
Like, yeah, dominant culture within like the US. And so I want to do more. I want to do better at like more like less US
centric
based or like centric, which I don't think I've done as well at, but that's like, a goal for the future.
It's hard, admittedly. Yeah. We're in the market for this is the marketplace where US books are.
Where a lot of it, it's like one of the main, so it makes sense why it's difficult, but like, however much I can.
Yeah.
But that's really why. It's mostly like I don't read white people anymore for the most part. And I just want to read all the stories from people of color. And I love when I like find stories from places that I haven't, or like that have like mythologies or perspectives that I haven't read before. And so that's kind of just been my bag for the last, I don't know, a long time.
For me, so I guess it's multifold, right? As it always is. So one, fantasy is like my primary genre. I think second to fantasy is like mystery, and then horror is growing. I'm slowly getting more into horror.
Ooh.
I realized I was sticking away from horror because, I feel like reading is very intimate, and it gets to a part of my brain where kind of like I absorb it in a different way than I do like TV or movies. And so even when I watch TV and movies that are horror, I need the safety net of like my partner, so I can just like, even if it's like, if it's not that bad, I can just like hide my head or like grab and you can tell me when the bloody party is over and then I can pop back in. And so you can't really do that when you're reading. You can't have like someone tell me when it's over. And so I was avoidant of horror until I realized there was horror, like gothic horror and stuff that I could pick up and enjoy and not like have a nightmare afterwards. So I've been getting more into that. And so the thing about fantasy is that fantasy is one of those like chocolate or like a candy or a substance, like a cake or something, where multiple things can kind of like tie in with it, and it just blends well and as a genre. And so I end up all the other genres that I'm interested in, like historical fiction and horror and mystery, I can pick up a fantasy and it can be fantasy and that thing, fantasy and sci-fi. Yeah. And so that's why like fantasy as a genre has become my overarching genre. And then like Bayana said, I've been picking up other cultures and I've been introduced to, but then also and the mythos behind them, but also the fact of like I found that because I love, again, historical mystery, historical fantasy, historical stuff, sometimes especially like now that I've gotten older and I've like been interrogating narrative and my lenses that I see for things, you realize when the story is being told for fantasy and the things that I used to, and I still kind of enjoy some components of like the fantasy novel written with like an English-ish kind of voice, you know what I mean? Like The Secret Garden or something like that, where it's like got that kind of like voice to it. It comes from a colonial lens. And I don't like reading books that have a colonial lens and is not interrogating that colonial lens in some way.
Yeah.
And so I find that the authors that are doing that the most or have the books that I find the most tend to be the Black authors, the Asian authors, but also more and more I'm seeing, because more people are getting opportunities, Indigenous authors are doing this, Latin artists are doing, like authors are doing this. So I get very excited by like the changing perspective and the changing idea of what fantasy can be, because these other voices are popping in and they're not looking at like war being inevitable or like colonization being inevitable or like unstoppable forces or things that are like natural to people doing. They question that, they push back at that, they rewrite what's like these different worlds where this is not a component of that world. And there are like, as time is going on, I think that their influence has changed up how some white authors are looking at culture and how they're writing fantasy, because the books I've picked up tend not to have that lens as much anymore that are white fantasies, but I still love to spend more time with the people of color voices that are doing it than the white ones, but I do pick them up on occasion.
That's so true and really poignant for the time we're living in now. But like, there's something about the colonized and the oppressed can recognize that in each other's story. So then reading stories written from the lens of the colonizer and the oppressor, or those who have benefited from the colonizer and oppressor generations down, you can hear it in the voice and like the decisions and how they're telling the story. Like, for example, like C.S. Lewis's works about England's colonization? No. But is it an English work that is informed by like that very thing? Absolutely. Like it takes place during war times.
It
like
also has like Christian motifs, which are like very like colonial, like, you know, like yeah. So, and you see it now happening in the real world. Like it's a real recognized as real situation. Everybody who's been colonized is looking over at Israel and Palestine. It's like, that's interesting. That's weird. Anyways, we're keeping it light. We're keeping it on fantasy, but you know, fantasy comes from a real place.
Very much.
It does,
so.
exactly.
Very real place.
The real world very much informs fantasy.
Yeah, exactly. It very much,
whether like the author acknowledges it or not, like it always does.
Right. Whether they're intending for it to or not. Like me as a writer, I can't, like, even if I'm like, I'm just going to write a cute little story, like I'm bringing my point of view and my viewpoints and my opinions.
You're not writing if you don't have anything to say. If you have something, you write because you have something to say. And usually that is built up by your reaction to the world around you. If you had nothing to say, you wouldn't be writing.
Exactly. And I've definitely read BIPOC authors who, what they had to say, I was like,
no, thank you.
Not that interested. Not that interested in what you're trying to say.
Definitely.
Right.
Yeah. But that's also the like beauty of having so many now that you don't have to go hard for the ones that didn't resonate with you or that may have been potentially harmful in some way. Like you can just leave that where it is and find the next thing.
And usually still, even though those exist, the batting average is higher. Like I have a much better chance at having a story that is rooted in similar values that I have if I read a story by a BIPOC author than I do if I don't. Not to say that there aren't white authors with good values who are trying their best in like getting sensitivity readers. That all exists. But like I don't have a hard rule, but
Black folk do it better. That's just generally for the most part.
I mean,
yeah.
So there's something to be said too about, it's a conversation that comes up often with our other co-host, Robin, about like our rating systems and how I don't generally rate below a 3. Like if it's below a 3, I probably didn't finish it, which again, with a grain of salt, because I only started DNFing books like this year. But I also think of my rule as like a pre-curated situation, right? Like I'm not reading books that are, not that a book I read, not that like people of color can't be racist, but like the likeliness of that happening is lower. Like the likelihood of certain like bumping into different like, you know, kinds of bigotry or oppression without it being interrogated is a lot lower. And so because of that, like I'm mostly just judging it based on whether I like it or not. Not to, on top of that, like publishing is, you know, what it is. And so a lot of people of color have to be near perfect to even get representation, to even get the opportunity to be published. And even that's not a guarantee, but it also means that like the books that are generally, again, have like a much higher caliber because they have to jump through like so many other hoops. And so again, it's all like, it becomes like okay, I'm pretty sure at least it'll be a 3.
I think another thing to make is like, point to make up on that bigotry point is that we have arrived to this place because we have been hurt so much in the past by the not thinking behind that bigotry that shows up in the stories that one major one that became beloved, and then we really had to like re-look at the bigotry within, right? But then generally over time, the books that we have read and do read, you know, you pick them up on occasion and you're like, this hurt me. Why did this happen? You know, for me, I DNF with a big regard towards that, and I'll pick up something like a cozy mystery. And you think it's a cozy mystery, like it shouldn't be too steeped in too much, but there's too many cozy mysteries that have a cop as a love interest without actually interrogating what a cop as a love interest really means. And like who's going to feel safe around this person and like all that. Like they don't really do that. And then they look at community without questioning why their community is made up of people that look like other white folks and does not have a like, or if it does have a person of color, it's like a token, or you know what I mean? Like they don't, and it's hurtful. And so you can only run into so many hurtful representations and like things within stories before you're like, I'm going to go towards the stories that tend not to hurt me, and I can actually like exist within and actually build me up and actually like build on, not if I'm not something like, you know, like we all, each of us here like I'm probably more aspirant than you two. I'm more like less out in practice of like writing, but like if it's not inspirational to like conducive to writing, it's at least like it's aspirational and inspirational to like escaping or just putting you in a different place and putting you in a different journey than you currently in like in your own life. And so I think that's without being harmful to you at the same time. Maybe it'll touch on hard subject matter, but it's not going to hurt you. And I think that is a component that people underestimate whenever they're talking about like, oh, everyone's looking for diversity and inclusion, but no one, you know, like they give like this false narrative that like authors of color are getting like hired more or getting contracts more than white authors because they're doing a quota, but not actually recognizing the reasons why, one, that's not happening, and two, like the reason why we need more authors of color is because y'all are hurtful and do not care and do not wonder why you're being hurtful. You just do it. And like, why would I be okay with picking up a story from someone who continues to have hurtful works in there and they're not interrogating that? Like, that's just irresponsible. And so, yeah, I really do DNF without abandon, especially if I get to someone who's doing hurt. Like, I'm like, this is, I picked up this expecting this to be a cozy little mystery, and here you go talking about why this cop is justified for being extra surveillance heavy. Oh no, we will not be doing that.
Oh no. Yeah.
No thanks.
See, that's for someone, but it's not for me. Yeah. No, I definitely don't. I shouldn't have to wince when reading it. That's something I've started thinking recently. Now that I'm back in my reading era.
A cute, like, you know,
unless it's embarrassing.
It's embarrassing, or it's like it's too cute. You're like, oh gosh, like it's sweet, but y'all need like, are we gonna move past this? Like, okay, we're good.
But it shouldn't be like, oh, that was a little racist. Okay, I shouldn't have to do that.
It shouldn't trigger you to like a microaggressive moment in your life.
Exactly. So I've definitely curated my reading experience a lot more. It's not a hard rule, but it's much more curated. And the books, the stories, it's breathing a whole fresh new life into like the types of stories we're hearing. So I want to know from y'all, what is it specifically about Asian fantasy that they have to offer to us, especially as Black fans?
I'm trying to think of like an example. So I have to use examples in order to actually like, get there. So as an example, so the Greenbone Saga by Fonda is...
I still am not okay.
Oh no.
Still not okay. Porshèa, that was me.
Let me go ahead and pull up my story graph so I can add these to my
I
TBR.
need to sue her for damages. Oh my God, bro.
So let me tell you right now, if you are like a reader, like if you're going to enjoy the books that I recommend, you're going to go through pain, but you're going to enjoy it. If you like angst, if you like characters, like, you know, like a archetypical, that's the hero character, you know, that's the anti-hero, whatever, and you know that their journeys are going to probably look a certain way, like they're going to be morally gray and they're going to bring this to the story or XYZ. If you're okay with that not always being true, perhaps a George R. R. Martin level death occurring to some people that you thought was going to live.
You were like, I swear to God.
Oh no.
When I tell you that I was reading I guess it was the last book on a family trip to Disneyland, and I had to stop.
Oh, that was
reading.
the book you were reading?
I had to stop reading after like the way that the chapter ended. I was so shook, and they were like, "You guys ready to go?" And I'm just like haunted, right?
And it like stayed with her. I didn't know this was the book,
Bro.
but Bayana like told us while she was on the trip that this happened, and it like stayed with her.
I was like, I don't even know what to do. No, that's it. The Greenbone Saga it's great.
Okay.
So what in particular made this story, so that the arc, like the not being, I like something that hit me in my feels. Like I am, I guess, emotionally suppressed. Like I'm not like a very emotive like I emote with I'm emotive facially, whatever, but I'm not like, I'm not effusive with my feelings. I don't like
all three of us.
Yeah. I don't live that life. I don't wear my heart on my sleeve. I just don't. So the way to get me is through like cerebrally, and then I'll realize like, oh crap, you made me feel something, and it was deep. It hit. Target hit. You got me. And so I love stories like that. And Greenbone Saga did it very well. And it's interesting because there are nuances on what stories will do that well for me, right? Like Greenbone Saga has like some fighting things in it. It has some mafia things in it. Those are not things that typically are my, like, I don't mind like a warrior class or whatever in a story, like fine, sure, whatever, but that's not going to sell me. Like the action of that is not going to sell me. What's going to sell me is the character journey and the depth and the world building. And when I tell you that world building is
I would say the like family aspect of it too.
Yeah.
It's very messy, but like at the end of the day, like you know, I don't watch Fast and Furious, but it really is about the family. So it definitely like it gives that.
And it gives like in a way that feels real. Like isn't like you know how like you see commercials of siblings and they're like, oh bro, like no. This is like real sibling stuff. Like they really are like they know each other, they've grown up with each other, they poke at each other's weaknesses, they sometimes build on each other's strengths, depends on how they're feeling that day. Like it is real sibling relationships, real trauma from parents and like it's real stuff. And I enjoy things that like take what could be like, you know, and I love, for instance, I love fairy tale retellings because I think that of so many fairy tale retellings do a great job at like not only just retelling but remixing and reclassifying the story. And I think that one thing to go back to, like I'm not going to like forget and not acknowledge that like fairy tales originally, as they were originally conceptualized, were dark. And I love me a dark story. And so a lot of the fairy tale retellings I've seen, especially done by people of color, and this is often Green Saga, I'm sorry for a second, is that they'll do retellings, like especially like a lot of the Asian fantasies. I've read like Six Crimson Cranes. They'll take an Asian fairy tale that like, you know, is like Western world really hasn't gotten a lot of, and they'll mix it in such a way that like I might not know the original story that it goes with it, but I get it's following a structure. And then it's also a tale of like siblings and family and a journey and like loss and gaining and understanding yourself. Yeah. And as long as you're doing that well and compellingly and you're hitting me in the feelings I did not know I had until you pushed me there with a character, then I'm going to go along with you. And I think there's something very enchanting about like the idea that this is a story that's been passed along and that was like a warning and a cautionary tale, because that's what fairy tales usually are. But you wove it in such a way that became a full world around what could have been like was originally like a short little missive and a collection of short stories. So I think that like, I don't know. There's something it's not just that like the Asianness of it. It's the ability to weave like a master, like and craft a world around this thing that might be a small idea, then grow it out kind of thing as
I think the other thing too that made me think about, which actually like connects Six Crimson Cranes and the Green Moon Saga, is the like story beats and how you know we're very used to the hero's journey, especially in like Western media, and they hit specific beats. You have, you know, there's like if you're writing, you see when you Google how to write or like how to write a story, especially a fantasy story, it goes through this like hero's journey. And so I think a lot of Asian fantasy plays with that or disregards it completely. And so you get to like experience other ways to tell stories. And it's just as compelling, it's just as interesting, like, you know what I mean? So it's one of those other things is that it shifts your perspective on like how you tell a story, and what are the important things that you focus on in those stories, in addition to like learning new mythologies and like different kinds of world building and all that. So that also kind of draws me to those kinds of stories as well, because it's like, oh, okay, we're just getting a lot of different things, and it's not all just the same, like, you know, what is it, reluctant hero goes on a quest, like, which you know, sometimes I mess with that, you know what I mean, sometimes that's what you need, but it's also good to get like a diverse, like, just get different kinds of stories and different kinds of heroes or anti-heroes or just like people trying to make it through, you know.
It also kind of feels played out sometimes, like that reluctant hero. Like how many times am I going to read? Like, you know, like if you got to mix it up, you got to mix it up. I was going to say, especially also on the like fairy tale riff thing of that, like Western authors, like white authors, have had their hand in giving us stories from different countries and cultures from a white lens. For instance, 1,001 Nights and stuff like that. And so I love being able to pick up someone that is their culture, riffing on that thing. So I mentioned that to mention Stardust Thief does that, and I enjoy being able to see. Whenever there's a tell from someone where Jin is part of their culture is using that as a focus in their story, I love to pick it up because I'm like, I want to see what it is like to have grown with that culture, for that to be like stories that your parents were telling you at night, or your grandparent or whatever, someone is telling you that story at night. And I had this like probably very watered down Disney Aladdin, and while I love Robin Williams or whatever, like that's probably not a Jin like that is originally from like that culture, right? So I really also enjoyed that, like having the ability, like now that there's so many more voices are getting those opportunities to write these kind of stories, to like change how I might have originally thought and conceived of this idea that was introduced to me by a white writer, and now finally get it from someone of the culture who actually is from there. And they riff on it, but it's still a different way of me conceptualizing the idea and concept itself.
All of that just snaps for all of that. Because 100%. I also think it's just fascinating, on a like meta level, that we all come to these stories and like, specifically with an Asian fantasy, I realize, they're covering themes and topics and grappling with issues that I care about from my cultural context, but they're wrapping them in a completely different cultural context. And I think it's so fascinating how like cross cultures, these things can resonate with us. And it's something about, even when they're not necessarily coming from a marginalized culture, like if you're Korean, grew up in Korea, you're not necessarily marginalized on that axis, right? But there's just something about, it sounds so simplistic, but kind of something about not being white from the West, that like similar stories start to bubble up. And I think that's super fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, I will also say like a lot of the, I would say particularly like South Asian stories that I've read, like those are the ones that are popping in my head right now, are like very anti-colonialism in a way that like why. Really hits. And it's like, it's one of those things where, again, you get to, obviously it's from a different perspective, different history, but it resonates so much. And like, so that's also one of my favorite things. It's like, you're about to tear down the systems and the structures. Like, let's get into it. Like, let's go. I'm with you.
An actual rebellion, an actual revolution.
Right. Like, y'all.
Who would have thought? Huh. Interesting. Yep. Okay, well, I know you'll have a lot of recs, but before we get into it, like, just for the listeners, like, what are you looking for specifically in a good Asian fantasy, or maybe these apply across BIPOC fantasies?
Well, the anti-colonialism for one, which, like, honestly, like, again, it depends on the, like,
it is a bonus.
I would say
it's a bonus, structure of the story.
And I would say it depends on the like breadth of the world. So if it's like a smaller focus, then you know what I mean. Like if we're giving like full world building secondary, like let's get into it. But it could also not be the focus, depending on like what stories you're trying to tell or mythology you're focusing on. I would say I mean, I love a trope, and that's just like in general, love a slow burn, love like the yearning. I am about to wax poetic about Tasha Suri in a bit. I'm gonna leave it for now, but because she has both, and it's wonderful. I love world building in general, so like I want to get into the nitty gritty. Like, tell me everything. Give me a map. And tell me where we're going and how we got here. I'm all about that. So those are like my like top 3.
I think for me, like along the lines of like what we're talking about, like not like counter the whole like general hero's journey. If you get like stick me with someone who then maybe initially they're unlikable, maybe they're gonna always be unlikable. Maybe they're just like awful, like not awful, like not like genocidal awful, but like maybe they're just like abrasive and like like just not the person that you initially think you're gonna get along with or whatever. But like they have a heart of gold. And also, you're not going to F with them. Like, watch your step. So, Avatar Kyoshi, watch your step.
Period.
Don't play with me.
Get into it.
Don't do it. Like, I also enjoy, and I read middle grade books. basically, like, as an adult, full grown adult here, I am so excited to see works coming out that I would have loved to have had as someone who was like in middle school, early high school, and like had them build up those parts of me that I wasn't seeing built up at that time and moment in the books that I was able to pick up at the time. And so in middle grade books, I look for stories that have like the cuteness of like what that area of life looks like, of like, oh, like your first time you're having like big feelings about something and you're trying to figure out what to do with them. But done in a way that actually feels like conducive to what like your actual day-to-day looks like, and like it affects how like you're changing and you're noticing things that are happening with the adults and like what's going on in your life, like around like what's getting taken care of and where you can fit in that, and do you need to help out, and like stuff that kind of like gets you there, and like that time of life. Those things are really cool to me for middle grade stories. I love like where a middle grade story kind of gets like you're growing, but also feelings, but also like it's like I like that. And then I think for Asian fantasies specifically, just this is a bonus, like on top of the like pushing back at an anti-colonial lens, is either like a unity thing or a challenging of the system in a way that makes me better understand the system and why it needs to go. And that's probably just all fantasy. Like especially if it's like a big world, like why is it important that the system needs to go, and why is it important that you do it?
Interesting. Okay. Well, we can get into the Recs now. I will say they did not tell me what they're coming to recommend. I may have read it. I may have not. I will be adding them to my TBR. In fact, they probably have already yelled at me about a couple. I bet. Probably. Okay.
Probably.
I pass it off to y'all.
You can go for, I try not to put in too many that I think that you might have read. So I'm like, Bayana's probably gonna talk about this one, I'm not gonna think about it.
I just want to first put in Tasha Suri. I love pretty much, if she publishes a book, I still need to get, she wrote a Doctor Who like novella. I need to get it. It like just came out pretty recently, but her and Kaylin Bayron, they both like, it's like a collection thing they did that happened. But pretty much anytime she drops a book, I'm guaranteed to buy it. Again, the like combination of like slow burn, like aching, yearning, and then like anti-colonialism, anti like empire, is just like, it's really great. And so I would probably like the Jasmine Throne is like the current series. The first 2 books are out, but it's a trilogy. That one is like really good. I had to reread the first one before the second one because I was like, I know it gets like complicated and there's like so much other stuff, like so much stuff happening, but that one is really dope. And then like her earlier books, Empire of Sand and Realm of Ash, that was like how I found her, and I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna stick with you now. So like any of her books are great. I would say Sabaa Tahir, Ember in the Ashes, that full series that has Jin and is very brutal. It's YA. It's so good. I think I might reread it next year. But that one is like, it's very good. It's not the Hunger Games at all, but it gives that like, you get really connected to the characters. Nobody's safe. You're just very stressed all the time. And yeah, it's really great. And then I'll also say, like, I just read pretty recently The Surviving Sky, which was really cool. It was about there's like these, so it's like after the world has, or it's not clear whether it's like our world, but anyway, there's a world that has like basically is unlivable on the ground because there's like these storms that just go on forever. So all of the like cities are like floating above. And because of that, the way that the society is set up, the people, they're called architects who like maintain the city, are kind of put above everyone else. They're kind of like seen as the most important. And then you kind of, that starts to kind of unravel. It centers like this married couple who have been, they're estranged. And so, but they end up having to work together as like the city is starting to fall apart around them. And they're like learning. So again, it's like all these different kind of power structures. There's like a blurring of like what's right and wrong. It's like very dope. And I think there might be a sequel coming at some point, but
I looked it up and it does say perfect for fans of Tasha Suri. So
on brand.
You see it. There's so many, but I'm gonna let Porshèa go and then maybe we'll piggyback.
So I feel like we're coming in series heavy. I promise you I have some standalone options as well.
Please. Yeah. Look. I like a series. I do. But do you know how many times I put stuff on my TBR? Think it's going to be the one. I finally get around to it, the library. And I'm like, wait, there's going to be another. Sometimes I just want to read a story. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. So
I do and I don't.
Yeah, like I'm both and at the same time.
Yeah. I'm that like the majority of the Asian fantasies that I know of are series. And
I feel like that's fantasy in general.
Yeah, I love that I also love that for them because it means that when you're making those contracts, you're getting like multiple stories out, and I get paid. More stories that we can have that are proliferating of Asian authors. Like, give me like I'm not like gonna rebuke that, but if you are a standalone person or just like you're trying to like get to a standalone kind of place, I will note Light from Uncommon Stars is like a mix of fantasy sci-fi. It's about these aliens who make LA their home, and they are like Asian coded, and they set up their base of operations in a donut shop in LA. And they like, they buy the place from the former family that lived there, and they're like kind of incognito, and they like basically are passed the method and the ingredients and the recipes for how to do the donuts from the family. But that's just part of the like character story here. We also have a young trans woman who is a talented violinist who is basically kicked out of her home, and she tries to make her way into becoming a professional violinist by traveling to LA and like being part of the circuit. But then also gets waylaid by like who she is, and then people who take advantage of her. So while one day she's in the park, she's playing, and she's overheard by this woman who is a world-renowned violinist and teacher, and she takes her in, and the story ends up involving the alien family. And also the woman who took her in has a contract with the devil to have at least, I think it's 8 students to pay back her contract. And she's hoping to make the violinist who was thrown out the 8th person to fulfill her contract with the devil.
Oh, fascinating. That does sound really good, but I will say when you're talking about the violinist playing in the park, all I could think of was Homie from Boys Over Flowers when he's like in the woods playing his violin. Do you know who I'm talking about?
I don't remember his name. Boys Over Flowers.
If y'all have seen Boys Over Flowers, you will know. Like he's in all white. He's sitting there with his little violin, you know, in the woods,
it's
just like
so
being emo.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that was the vibe. I think the biggest thing that like I took away from Boys Over Flowers was like homegirl on the roof and like really playing at being on the edge of the roof while also like not, this random Boys Over Flowers. Anyways, it is so well done. It does multiple POV. It'll put you with one character, then the other, then another, then another. And it doesn't feel disjointed. It flows really well. It really does help add to the plot because then you're seeing like it moves and you're seeing why the donut family's based on Earth and what they're trying to prevent, and then why that's interconnected with the devil's contract. And like it's just like it flows really well together. Another standalone, if you're trying to get a bite of a couple different stories and you're not opposed to short stories, there's an anthology called Magic Has No Borders, and it's all Asian authors with Asian fantasy stories. I think it may be YA or new adult. It's within that realm of like age bracket. So if you're into that, there are multiple stories in there that I enjoyed. Some of the authors within that story or within the book are people that we're probably recommending to you right now. to go back to the story about the reader that I did not realize was a reader, that is called the Reader series by Tracy Chi. She is my, like, hands down, if Tracy Chi's writing something, I'm reading it. She wrote a story about internment camps, which is like an award-winning book, but also heartbreaking, right? She wrote a story that came out a couple years ago that wasn't my fave, but it did some things. I don't care. She's coming out with another one coming out next year. I'm going to read it. I love it. She did. The Reader series is so well done. I was like, she could write a new version of the Yellow Pages. I'm here. Because like
the Yellow Pages.
I'm here. She's like, here are all the numbers you need to, sure, I'm with you. And then before I pass it back to Bayana, another thing that you might be interested in doing if you're like, you know, yes, it's a series. They are series, but they are graphic. So maybe that'll be helpful. I really enjoyed the Snow White with the red hair, the anime. And so I picked up the manga. The manga is just as good, if not better. And that is an Asian, like a Japanese author's taking on Snow White, but it's not really Snow White. It's like a whole different story. And it's fun. And then I really also enjoyed, I've only read the first one in this so far, but it's called Witchy by Ariel, Salamet, Ries. And that one does a really good job of like creating a fantasy world where you can tell the pressures that are going on. And there's also like the magic is determined by the character's hair length. And one character rebels by cutting their hair after something tragic happens to them. And then this whole thing spirals out. They learn about this underground rebellion. There's a lot. So, but it's really cool. I read the first one in the series called Witchy, and I'm looking forward to the next ones.
Oh, that's so interesting. Hair length like means so much culturally to different cultures. Like, what a fun, maybe tragic, who knows, concept.
Fun is relative.
Sometimes tragedy is fun.
You know? I feel like the rest of mine, we either all or a couple of us have read. I will say Iron Widow, which I might have mentioned the last time I was on.
You did. It's still on my TBR, which is so wild because
it's really,
it does not have to be on the top of your TBR, but that's just my opinion.
You also have time. Like the second book doesn't come out until like April.
I know,
I think.
it got delayed, right?
Yeah, so like you have time. It's but
also I would recommend folks, even if you haven't read, you should follow Xiran on socials. They're great.
They are.
Twitter, YouTube. I just enjoy. They're very good at it, but like their commentary, they're so witty. Y'all should go follow.
Yeah, the book is so like I think I read it in a day, which, to be fair, like it was like I was in like a mode. It was like the end of the year, maybe last year or the year before, and I read like 3 books in 3 days because I was just like, this is all I'm doing, and I'm like, I'm in it. And so that was one of the books that like fell in that kind of fever, whatever, feverish moment of being like, I'm just gonna read. But I really enjoyed it, and like I definitely feel like I might have to reread it before the new one comes out, or like before I get to the new one. But it was just like, it was so angry and so like, again, like anti-establishment. It really looks at like sexism, while also like they're fighting these like giant mecha like monster. Like, so it's like it has the like I guess I would say like societal like critique, and also like really epic battles with a like pretty unhinged main character, but in like the best way, you know what I mean? Like you're definitely rooting for her, but you're also like, she wild, and like, oh my god, what is going on here? Also, it has a true love triangle, which is pretty rare,
stressful,
but is also, I think, becoming more popular. No, and I mean, like everybody's with everybody. They're good.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay,
polyamorous. Yeah,
got it. I thought you meant a true triangle in which they are all liking like towards like a different direction. Yeah.
Imagine that would make me mad, not gonna lie.
Yeah, that sounds stressful. I don't want that.
What is that, like Midsummer's Night, like where that's like she likes him but then he likes her and then and you're like,
oh I think so. Yeah, that's always that's a different kind of stress.
Right.
We already talked about Jade City. I guess we should talk about Daughter of the Moon Goddess.
Oh, let's talk about Daughter of the Moon Goddess. I definitely have read that one. And Heart of the Sun Warrior.
They're on my TBR.
It's very good. I think it also, like, for me, when we were talking about like non-Western storytelling structures, I think that one also kind of like comes up for me in the way that, like, you know, the main character is very much a hero, but the kind of journey she goes on, it goes over the course of years. It's like,
yes,
she travels to a lot of different places. They're like, it feels more like story arcs in some ways. Yeah, I really liked it. The ending of the last book, it was like almost had me in the first half.
It was exactly like that.
I was like, there's no way that this is being ruined for me, and then it wasn't, and it was great. So like that, but yeah, no, I really appreciated that story and like just the mythology, and it was so pretty. Like, you could
so
just
pretty,
like everything that was described, it was like very vivid. Even the like dark moments, or like, you know, heavier, more violent moments, were still very like, it just had this kind of like filter. Oh, I don't know if that's the right word, but it just was like very like, yeah, it was just pretty.
I feel like you can feel the, you know, we're talking about how these stories are coming from different cultures, and therefore like the pacing is different. Just the story, it just feels different. Like, you can feel the Chinese drama inspiration that went into it. Like, everything is pretty. The hijinks, like, it's just straight out. Like, it's just the drama.
The drama is.
It has been a long time since a book, two actually, has taken me for a ride quite like that. Like, I was up, I was down. She was playing me like a fiddle.
Yeah.
Like, it was wild. And yeah, it was, like Bayana was saying, it's also a very good example of like how different storytelling conventions can have different pacing. Because there is a part, it's not really a spoiler, there's a part where they just skip many years, like, just all of a sudden, like, oh, but it works and it makes sense. And it's like, I feel like in Western stories, when that happens, it's kind of like a cop out. It's like tacked on to the end, but it just happened in the middle of the story. And like, the characterization that came as a result of it, you got to go on this like longer, broader character arc and story as a result. And I think that was really lovely.
Yeah.
And
it also helps that they're immortals. So like, if they skip a lot of time, you're like, okay, well, the time for you may not have felt as long as it might have if you were not. So there's that aspect of it too.
It kind of lends itself to the world building in that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's on my TBR. I just have not. I try to give every book that I read its best chance. The only books that are exceptions are like if my library holds on Libby. Like, if I got you and you're you're very popular hold, I'm going to read you as soon as I got it. And if this is not the best time for me to read you, sorry, but I'm going to read you before my hold is done.
This is an aside, I have not found the solution for that, because like, I was definitely not in the mood for this book, and I know that's 100% why I DNF'd it, but I got Cemetery Boys and I was reading it and I was like,
I liked it.
It's not hitting, I'm so sorry, and so I DNF'd it.
I haven't picked it up yet, because I haven't picked that one up, or there's so many books that I'm like, I might be fine with it. I just need the
you have to be in the right mood. Yeah,
that's
very real. And I'll sometimes have books that I'm like, I'm gonna read it on this month or whatever, and then I get to it and I'm like, I would rather read that later. Like, it's not gonna happen right now.
So I've been trying to do better about my holds, because I was like, I just felt, I'm like, this is so unfair to you, but it's just not the vibes right now. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it's like they be that way sometimes. We should also talk about Kyoshi, since like,
oh, of course.
Gang.
Now, listeners, one day we're gonna have an Avatar episode, because we must. But people may be listening like, wasn't that written by two white guys? It was. And we pretend we do not see. But the books were not.
They were written by an Asian man. FC, who I think my first review for The Plot Thickens, I might be wrong, it might be something else, was FC's book, The Epic Crush of Jenny Liu, which was the duology he wrote before he did the Avatar series. And so I knew I liked his writing before I picked up the books. Like, I liked it. It wasn't like a 5-star, but I enjoyed it enough. His writing married with Avatar Kyoshi, mastercraft.
It's really good.
Kyoshi is my favorite avatar. Did we spend a lot of time with her in the TV series? No. But did I know she was?
Already knew.
I already knew.
I really appreciate like with the series in the way that like it follows her before she's like who we've built her up to be, or who like the, you know, in the series who they built her up to be. So you get to see her like stumble through becoming the Avatar in the same way that you see like Aang do it, and I assume Korra, but I have not watched that yet.
Gotten there yet.
But yeah, so I thought that was great. I haven't read. I know that he also did Yang Chen.
Yes,
and I think those are both out now. So
the second one's better than the first one. I'll give y'all that. So like, don't be deterred by the first Yang Chen. It's better than the second one.
Yeah, I haven't read Yang Chen yet, but the Kyoshi one was so good. I don't know, listeners, if you haven't seen Avatar, if the books will be as interesting to you. They're definitely very dependent on your knowledge of the lore, I think. But
I feel like they are and they aren't, though.
If you watch the show, you should be fine.
No, I'm saying like if you haven't watched it.
I still think it might actually be. I personally felt like, because it's so much like further in the past, like the way that the world is set up, like, yeah, there are like mentions like Ba Sing Se is still around, you know, they have like the water tribes, the air nomads exist and all that kind of stuff. But like, I don't know, it felt to me like you didn't necessarily need all that information. It helped color it because you're like, oh, I see what they'll become, or there's like seeds for like how we get to where they are in the show. But because it's so far in the future, it's like 2 Avatar cycles before Aang, that it to me didn't feel like you had to have prior knowledge of it because it comes after.
I would be interested if any listeners do pick up the Kyoshi series without having watched Avatar, please say something. I would love to know. Like, that's a cool study of like how, like, would you feel inspired to watch the Avatar thereafter? Like, how are you feeling about that? Because
or was this a good standalone book? I will say, as far as like extra canon things, I know that Korra is controversial. Some people hate it, some people love it. And the comic books, to me, and certain sects of the fandom are controversial or just poorly written. Depends who, like, what your opinion is. But the Kyoshi books are not that. I think they are super solid. What every fandom hopes the extra canon content of their particular fandom is going to be.
I just love Kyoshi. But I love that she's true to her character, like the character roots. Like, they could have easily just given us like a building off of the popularity of the franchise kind of book, and not an actual character study of this person who becomes an avatar under a world that is deeply corrupt and within a corrupt kind of upbringing to an extent. Like she doesn't know that, but it is she's in the depths of the corruption, basically. And so it really did add a lot of nuance to a story that really could have been fluff, and I really enjoyed that they didn't play that there. And I've not picked up the graphic novels or like the comic books, so I don't know if that's like one of the issues there, but it really did. Like, I hate whenever studios like they capitalize on the like wraparound marketing of like, it was a TV show or a movie and now I'm putting it in a book. And, I hate when they do that without actually caring, and it does not do that at all.
Yeah. Agreed. Any other ones? So
let's do The Star-Touched Queen by Roshani and Chokshi. Oh my gosh. Like, do you feel like being in your feelings? Because if you do, pick up The Star-Touched Queen. It takes so it's The Star-Touched Queen, and I gotta remember what the second one is. And both of the stories, they're like companion books.
A Crown of Wishes. They're companion books. And so there might be some characters that are similar, like that are in this two books, but for the most part, they're two different god myths. Imagine these worlds, and I very much enjoy them. I think one of the things that like I've learned that I don't love all of her books, and that's fine. But I do really enjoy her writing. And I learned in some author interview that one of her favorite romances is Penelope with
okay. You love Penelope.
I love Penelope with Christina Ricci and James McAvoy. Like, that was my jam. And so I was like, I can trust someone who says that one of their favorites. And so that, like, if you enjoy Penelope, like, I'm not saying the same dynamics are in these two stories, but I think that like they do have really good like South Asian god representation. Like, if I don't know those gods very well, but I think that like if the fictionalization and like the difference in the storytelling and like the world building that's related to that is very well done. Horseback riding on the sand, going into a palace where you don't know where the corridor is going to take you. People that you like who look sketchy, but actually might have, they're strangers, but they might take care of you when someone else who looks like they should be caring are not. Like, really good. Well done. I enjoyed it so much. Pick those up. It's only 2 books. I've been trying to limit, but I can make it easier for you. Like, you know, if it's going to be a series. There's also the manga, I'm the Villainess, so I'm taming the final boss. Fun manga. I think the Villainess is like playing a video game and gets sucked into the world. And then come to find out these different things are happening. And there's like a demon king prince who basically gives Cell from Legendborn.
Interesting.
Okay.
I've been wanting to read more manga, actually. I haven't since I was in like high school, and I've kind of been missing it. So this is good to know.
And it's only 3 books, I think. I think it's only 3. So yes, pick that up. Okay, again, not all series keep that same intensity throughout. So I feel like the first book really had me. The second one was fine. And then the third one kind of let me down just a little bit, just like preempting your expectations. Like it's a good series, but like it doesn't keep that same balance throughout. It kind of like moves. But I really enjoyed it. Like, I think it was good. Another graphic series is Trese. You might have seen the Netflix series. It is like a Filipino like horror fantasy, basically. It's not like especially gory. There are like blood scenes, but it's basically like some Filipino mythos. They tend to be scary. They tend to have like dark characters and feature those. And the Trese is like her family, her father's side of the family were all like people who were rounding up these like these creatures, and her father dies and she ends up having to take over the like world that he was running. But then there's also corruption, governmental corruption that's intertwined with the spiritual corruption that's happening. And it also explains like why things aren't running well in the main city and all. Like it's good if you are like in a mood for something that's like dark underworld, mystery, intrigue, corruption.
I do love the underworld
and magic. Then I would say like pick that up. Also stabby, shooty. And then for a lighter touch, a standalone. Well, it's not a standalone, it's a series, but I read the one book and I love that one book and I'm not interested in picking up the other. So if you want to be like me and just ignore the rest of the series.
That's always an option, I guess, technically.
It's very true.
Because technically it's a 0.5 book, like it's a pre.
Yeah.
So it feels like standalone to me. So it's called Aliana Girl of the Dragons, and it's a dragon story. It's a middle grade dragon story where the girl finds a dragon and she lives like near a cliff and she ends up like raising like this dragon and going like and helping the city with her little dragon, and it's adorable and I love it. It is so cute. The village doesn't know her family well. There's a mystery behind why her family moved there, and then they get involved with something that's going on in a larger area. I'm not trying to like spoil too much. It is cute. It's not just cute. It has deeper moments. And there's a cute dragon, like an adorable dragon girl relationship. And I know our motto is more Black girls, more dragons, but if it's also like we're indiscriminate with like people of color and dragons.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm not mad, you know? Like, give me all
Julie
of it.
Abe is author of that. I read The Charmed List by her, which was young adult. And it was cute. It was just like a cute beach read. It was a cozy read. It was a cute, cozy read. So I'm going to have to circle back. So yeah, this was great. I hope everybody takes a little something. We may even I may write up also a separate graphic or something. I don't know, whatever the algorithms want, to just an easy list that y'all can reference so y'all can add it to wherever you keep your TBR, whether it's Storygraph, Goodreads, a spreadsheet, whatever it is you be doing. But before we jet and get out of here and go read, honestly, I have to finish up some podcast admin, but then I'm like, yeah, I think I'm going to end my night with reading. But before we do that, tell the people where to find y'all and what y'all got going on.
Yeah, so we're like Delia said, you can follow Black Nerds Create. We're also on Instagram and Tumblr at Wizard Team Pod. Lots of clips, lots of memes because those are fun. And I'm on Instagram. I'm pretty much everywhere at Yana Wrote It. But yeah, just follow us. We're reading Legendborn still, and more Black fantasy books in the near future.
Yep. I am Wizard Teamed Out. We recently did a series of like challenges for like sci-fi fantasy. So like please like our stuff and check it out. Like it was fun-ish, but also became kind of hectic. Like, oh, we're gonna do this. Okay, how do I take pretty book pictures? I don't know. Let's try this out. It's so hard.
It's the worst.
I don't know how y'all found that challenge, but like seeing y'all do that challenge made me want to do a challenge. So if anybody listening knows of any good 30-day challenges, like send them my way, because I like the idea of challenging myself to do that and get more creative with content, because I'm not content brained in that way. Not pejorative. Like I just don't have that creativity.
Thought. I think it also takes like following the people. Like I think especially for like book crafters. So like I am a big booktuber watcher, and like I kind of like the gram. I have people that I like know of and all like I follow, but I'm not always on Instagram. And Book Talk, trusting those people, even though I aspire to be better on TikTok, right? It's just I feel like there's different vibes in each of those spots, right? And the Insta content. So for books is like a certain kind of thing. So I would be interested in seeing like what kind of challenges you end up finding that's real like around the work that you do here, because it's just like different vibes for different platforms. For Insta and the photos of it all, like it really just depends. I've seen a lot of really cool trends happen with Bookstagram, and like how people will go from like we're gonna shoot on these like very standard solid color backgrounds, so like we're gonna be more dynamic and have like books magically falling out of a bookshelf or like whatever. Like it's really cool and people are inventive. I like seeing that.
I haven't found anything yet, but it's also because like these apps have gotten so bad at search, like to find something.
It's so bad.
Like there's a lot of like K-drama challenges that I found, but also I'm just like really hooked into the BIPOC K-drama community. Like they're so welcoming. I just love welcoming communities. Like the podcast isn't even K-drama specific, but the way they're all just so nice, it's so friendly. Like I'm like, should I be a K-drama podcast? Because y'all are just like good people over there. But anyway, so I've seen a lot of K-drama challenges, but like that's too specific. So I've been trying to look, but I will keep my eye out. But if y'all know, listening, of a good 30-day challenge that y'all would be interested in sharing with me, let me know, because I am on the lookout. I just want to do it for funsies. And you can find me doing all of that if somebody sends me one. At Culture X Podcast. Ooh, what a segue. But no, seriously, thank y'all for listening. You can also let me know. There will be a question. I keep trying to remember to tell y'all that on the Spotify app, you can actually input your response to the question. And today's question is, what is your favorite Asian fantasy story, whether it's in print, film, or otherwise? I'm open to all of it because we just love Asian fantasy around here. So let us know. Like I said, you can do that at Culture X Podcast, on Instagram for sure, on Twitter, ?
Black Nerds Create is on Instagram. I'm on TikTok. So if you have any stuff that you want to move over
you're on TikTok?
Yeah, no, Black Nerds Create is on TikTok. I am on TikTok. I'm on TikTok and Insta. Porshèa knows is everywhere, but TikTok Black Nerds Create has. So if you have stuff from the collective you want to share with the Black Nerds Create to do on the TikTok, there you go.
Because I'm not technically, I do have a TikTok. Technically, Culture by Culture has a TikTok, everyone, but I have not promoted it because I keep forgetting to upload my backlog because I have to remember it exists first and foremost. So
it's too many like apps. So it's like,
once we settle on one that isn't Twitter, I will I will be more consistent there. But for now, Twitter and Instagram, for sure Instagram. And until next time, keep it chill and keep it nerdy. Bye, y'all.
Bye.